my name is Bente, I'm the Norse Witch, and on this very nice sunny Sunday morning we will film a chill Q&A. So get yourself a nice hot cup of tea or coffee or a snack and let's dive into the questions. Okay, so as always with my Q&As, my patrons have Q&A priority. So I will answer their questions first and then I will dive into the Instagram and YouTube questions. I was about to say I doubt that I will get through all of the questions, but no, by now I know for a fact that I won't go through all of the questions because there are just too many. But I will definitely go through all of the patron questions. So if you want to make sure that your question is being answered in a future Q&A, then maybe subscribe to my Patreon. All right, first of all, I get negative emotional feedback when I trace the runes in the air. I am not sorry, for it means something is working, but what is happening and how to stop it? Okay, so that is very interesting. First of all, of course, I cannot tell you for a fact what is happening because I am not experiencing your experience, you know? In the end, you will be the only person who knows for a fact what's happening. But interestingly enough, for me, when I sense energy or when something is happening around me and I'm opening up to it and I let it happen and I let myself sense it, a lot of the times it will come up as a negative emotional feedback. Like it feels as though I'm sad and sometimes I start like crying. I'm not really crying, but like tears are streaming down my face. Even though I'm not sad or anything, it's as though I'm just feeling the energy by feeling a negative emotion or something. It's very strange. I can't really explain it very well, but it kind of feels like the same thing is happening in your case, or at least it could be the same thing or a similar situation. Of course, it's also possible that there's something else happening, but that's just my thought on what it could be. But of course, it could also be something completely different. It could be some kind of trauma that you are kind of unlocking in the process. It could also be some ancestral trauma. I don't know if your family had anything to do with runes at any point or something like that. I cannot tell you. I'm not a psychologist, so I would prefer not to go into that. But yeah, it could be that it's something similar as what's happening to me, but it could of course also be something completely different. But in that case, I cannot tell you what it is. Next patron question. How do you implement healing or therapy into your practice? I had a very bad childhood and I found that the overbearing mental load I carry is kind of hindering me from practicing my magic more than ever. I feel like I'm so focused on going to therapy and just surviving, I haven't made any time to be a witch. How can I incorporate my healing process into my witchy stuff? All right, so first of all, I think it's amazing that you're going to therapy and that you want to heal. That's amazing. I think everyone should do that. The thing is that if your therapy and your healing process is taking up so much space that you don't really have any time for your practice anymore, first of all, that is not necessarily something that you have to change. So in case you just feel like imposter syndrome or something like that, and that is why you feel like you have to practice more, then just rest assured you don't have to. It's totally fine to just focus on something else for a moment, and if that's therapy, that is a great thing. That's the first thing that I would say about this. You don't necessarily even have to incorporate witchcraft into anything like that. It's totally fine to just focus on therapy for a moment. But of course, I totally understand if you want to practice more alongside therapy. I have to say personally, I was only in therapy for a year or so, and I was in therapy for my anxiety, especially for my social anxiety. The therapy wasn't really that great, but at least I took some key points from it that I could at least incorporate into my life by myself. And that was basically just confrontation therapy. That's just what you do with anxiety. If you have social anxiety, then you confront yourself with people. So of course, that is not necessarily something that I could really incorporate my witchcraft practice into. But the interesting thing is that around that time also, Freya came into my life and I started practicing and working with Freya. And of course, Freya is not a socially anxious deity. Like, Freya is a badass, so I kind of feel like she is an amazing goddess to work with if you are an anxious person, especially a socially anxious person or a people pleaser or anything like that, as I am, all of these things. So for me, a lot of the healing came through deity work, simply because Freya pushed me to do things that would confront my anxiety. So that was very, very handy. For example, I started going to pole classes for Freya initially, and that was like a huge thing for me because that was triggering multiple of my fears, like exercising in front of other people, in general going into a situation that I do not know, I don't know what to expect, potentially doing something I'm very bad at in front of other people, in general meeting new people, everything like that. Just it was very, very hard for me to do, but she pushed me to do it. So that had an amazing effect. But of course, I also, whenever I know I'm pushing myself into a situation that will trigger my anxiety, I will just basically support myself with some spells. So for example, I have a bad bitch oil that I love. I love it so much. I also sell it on my shop. I wear it all the time in situations where I feel like I could use a little boost of self-confidence. So of course, whenever I am going into a situation that will make me anxious, that is something that helps me a lot. I also have more of a calming oil, my Sweet Serenity oil, that is more for calming down and not pushing myself. I kind of use these whenever I know I will go into a situation that triggers my anxiety. Apart from that, you can do a very similar thing, of course, with teas. Teas are great, teas are amazing. You could also, for example, make something like a spell bag that you can take with you to therapy, for example, to either calm you down or to give you self-confidence or anything that you feel like you need when you go to therapy, something like that. But you know, honestly, I have so much cat hair on my mouth today. But honestly, in my experience, something that helps me a lot, and you might say, oh, that isn't witchy, but I just go out into nature and I take a walk and I connect with the land spirits and I look at plant spirits and I admire them, and that, for example, calms me down a lot. That's something that helps my mental health a lot. Whenever I feel like shit, I try to go outside. So that is something that I do. Of course, if you want to do something to help with your healing, actually my patrons requested that I show a healing spell. So that is the next Patreon requested video that I will be working on, that you could also do for psychological healing. Of course, again, I'm not a psychologist, but you are already in therapy, so I don't have to tell you to go to therapy. So you could do some healing spells if you want to. Of course, that's only supposed to support you on your journey, but that's specifically what you asked for. So something like that. I will show you specifically a healing puppet combined with like a thralldom spell. So that's something that worked great for me. I didn't do it on myself, but on another person, but it worked great. For a physical illness though, not a mental illness. But yeah, that's something you could do. Do you have a favorite tarot and or rune set? Yes, I do. I will show you in B-roll. My favorite tarot deck, and honestly the only one I really use, is the Golden Art Nouveau deck. I am a huge Art Nouveau fan. I love it so much. It's my favorite art style. And it is gold foiled, so it's very, very fancy. I also really like it because it's very beginner friendly, because the imagery is basically the same imagery as the imagery on the standard Rider-Waite-Smith deck, which means that interpreting the symbols that you see on the cards is very easy with that deck. I personally don't really like decks that have art on them that is extremely out of the box, because then I cannot really interpret the imagery, and I do that a lot. So that's why I love the deck. It's one, extremely beautiful, very fancy. Every time I show it on videos, I get asked what deck that is. So the Golden Art Nouveau deck, nice. It's also not expensive. I love it. And yes, I have a favorite rune set, and I have looked for it for ages. Like, I have gone through so many different rune sets, sets that I have made myself, sets that I have bought, different kinds of materials, but in the end I got stuck on a set that was made with little antler slices. So someone sliced up antlers and I think burned the runes into them, and they are so beautiful. They are lightweight, they are small enough that I can carry them with me everywhere. I also like, for example, crystal runes. Of course, they're a classic, but they are very heavy, they are very big, and also I really like casting the runes. I don't necessarily pull runes a lot, I usually cast them. And for that I need something that, more like a coin or something that has two very simple sides, and with crystals or stones or something like that, that only works if they are like polished a lot to something like a thin slice situation. But the antler runes that I use already came like that, and that's why I love them. And yeah, I will show you in B-roll. They are amazing. I'm very new, so if you've already addressed this somewhere else, I'll eventually find it, lol. Can you explain a little about how ancestor veneration is practiced in Norse paganism? I've also seen several people talk about the Disir, forgive my spelling. It's actually perfect spelling. When they talk about honoring their ancestors, can you explain who or what exactly the Disir are, and how or why do we honor them? Okay, so first of all, in general, ancestor veneration and Norse paganism. We do know that they did it, or we assume that they did it, also because of all of the stories about like dead people's ghosts wandering around and things like that. It seems like their ancestors were a big thing. I actually have never really done research on specifically ancestor veneration in the Viking Age and prior to that. Maybe I should. Maybe you have just unlocked a new hyperfixation. If I should make a video on that, then tell me in the comments, because that always kicks my butt on making good research. We know that we assume that they did it, but I don't think I've ever read anything about a specific practice that they did, apart from desubloads. So that is something that we know. But the thing is that people aren't even really on the same page on what the Disir are. There are people who assume that the Disir, like the word Disir, is simply just a catch-all phrase for female supernatural entities, because the terminology for spirits from the Eddas and Sagas is a little bit complicated because words are used interchangeably a lot. So for example, Fylgja, or the Fylgjukona, the female woman Fylgja, is also called a part of the Disir a lot. Dis is also a postfix that is used for goddesses' names a lot. I mentioned it in my Fylgja video. So in the Fylgja video I also talk about the Disir. So if you are interested in that, you can watch that. But yeah, people aren't really on the same page on what the Disir are, but some people see them as a catch-all term for any female supernatural entity. That's where I'm also leaning towards. But some people also see the Disir as specifically female ancestral spirits. So that is also what on a desubload people would honor. That's the female ancestral spirits. So of course that is something that we know, or we assume that they did. Again, the terminology is a little bit murky as always, but that's something that we assume. But again, I know my answer to this question is not very helpful, but I think that will be something that I will make a video on soon, because I think that's very interesting. I will write it down right away. Next question for now, sorry. I think I remember you saying once that as time goes on you use less witchcraft books because of their repetitive information. What resources do you tend to use now for researching and learning? Woohoo, that's good. Okay, one, a lot of academic resources. I read a lot of archaeology books, history books, folklore, anthropology, things like that. I also use a lot of different herbology books, so like just books about herbs and their healing properties that have literally nothing to do with witchcraft is probably one of the books that I consume most. Also just in general, any kind of folklore. Like I read a lot of different folklore books, like any kind of English folklore books on like Scandinavian folktales. I will consume all of that. Literally alongside with the trolldom course that I'm doing, just reading Scandinavian folklore and fairy tales and things like that is probably my most important source for my trolldom practice. So I would advise everyone to read folklore. It's, in my opinion, it's very important. Someone said that Germany legalized marijuana. Do you plan on implementing that in your craft at all? That is such an exciting question because yes, it was legalized in April. I am extremely excited. Of course, the process is a slow one because German bureaucracy takes a lot of time. So at this point, we're now in mid-May. You still cannot buy it anywhere because there are like people have to get certifications and then start growing and then start selling and open up shops and things. So it's a slow process, but technically, even if you get it from a dealer right now, you are legally allowed to smoke it in specific areas. So of course, not around schools or anything like that. But you are now allowed to own it and smoke it. And once there are shops where you can buy it, then you're allowed to buy it. And will I incorporate into my practice? Okay, I have only smoked, I think once or twice or something. I have just taken one little whiff and it did nothing for me. But I want to try again, simply because I like working with altered states of consciousness. I'm not used to working with drug-induced altered states of consciousness though, not even alcohol or anything. If you know me, I don't take any drugs and I don't drink. But the thing is, if you also know me, I have migraines a lot. So that, apart from my witchcraft practice, is something that I definitely want to try weed for, and I really, really hope that it will do something for me. So that is something that I will definitely try. And while I'm already at it, I can also just try doing some spirit flight, for example. I don't really want to get really high, you know, that's not something that I want to do. I just want to try to basically, I don't know if microdosing is the right word here, but just take a very slight doses because I don't necessarily like taking drugs or anything like that. So I just want to, I don't know, find a doses that works for my migraines and then maybe try using that same doses to do some spirit flight, because like if I'm already smoking it, I can also try to use it for meditation and spirit flight and things like that. So yeah, anything like that I would try to use it for, but nothing else. Like I wouldn't try to cast spells while I am high or anything because I like to be in control while I'm casting spells. But yeah, spirit flight and things like that, that's definitely something that I would want to try. And even if smoking doesn't do anything, maybe I will try working it into a balm or something like that for a flying ointment. We will see. Okay. Do you have a UPG servitor story? Or what's your favorite protection UPG story? All right, so I don't have any servitors. That's not something that I use in my practice. I think it's really cool, but I don't personally use them. Use them, that sounds wrong. I have never created a servitor, that's not something that I do. My favorite protection UPG story. I don't have like a protection fail story or something like that. I could tell you about protection spells that I do, but I know I should not do that because I am a person on a public that posts publicly on a public platform. So I should not tell you about my protection spells. I can tell you that I don't have very good spiritual hygiene though. Like I have ran around without many protections, like personal protections. My home was always warded, but whenever I went out, I didn't really bother wearing protection or anything because I am very much not a good advocate for spiritual hygiene. I'm advocating for it, but I'm not necessarily doing it myself. Could also be, it's very, very possible also that I'm constantly like dragging graveyard spirits at home with me because I don't really care. I don't know. So don't do as I do. But now I actually have a hagstone. I finally found one and I won't tell you what I did. Did a small ritual and now I wear that all the time, so I have some protection now. But I'm definitely not a good protection working role model. Don't do as I do, people. Okay, what's your favorite tea? And what's your favorite food? My favorite tea is a very, very hard one. I don't necessarily, well, maybe I do. Okay, it's a tea that I cannot pronounce. I know I'm doing it a lot, but I always feel like I'm failing. Rooibos, I don't know how it's pronounced, but it's that kind of tea I actually don't know how to translate it into English, but it's a rooibos, however it's pronounced, tea with cream and caramel. It's an extremely cozy tea and I got it at a specialized tea shop here in Hamburg. It's such a cute shop. It looks like an old apothecary, you know, like tea bottles, like right under the ceiling, tea everywhere, and it's a very, very high ceiling and everything is full of tea. It's amazing, and they have so many different teas, specialized teas and mixed teas, and oh, I love going there. I have so many teas from them now. They're also not that expensive. Like, of course, they're more expensive than like a supermarket tea, but they're amazing. I don't know if Olivia is watching this, but I know Olivia will come to Hamburg with me after our Iceland trip. If you're staying long enough and you're interested, I will take you there because it's so good. Okay, and my favorite food, that's such a hard question. There's this one specific, I don't know, is it a casserole? I don't know how it translates to English. I think it's a casserole. It's a dish that you put in the oven and you bake it with cheese and stuff. Like a noodle casserole thing dish that my mom does, which has been a favorite of mine for a very long time. So I love that one. Also, my fiance recently made like a truffle parmesan cheese noodle sauce. I really like pasta. So a pasta with a truffle parmesan sauce, which is vegetarian. A lot of parmesans are not vegetarian, but that one was. It was a truffle parmesan, and he made a very simple sauce with it, but it was amazing. So I think that is also very much on the top. A lot of pasta, actually. I really love pasta, so I guess I will keep it at those two. Whenever pasta and cheese are involved, I'm in. How do you incorporate self-care into your practice? I already went into it a little bit with like the walks and things like that. But in general, one of the things that I do now is taking a step back, taking a break, and actually not practicing when I feel like I'm overwhelmed or I'm stressed or something. Sorry, my camera cut me off. But yeah, just not practicing when I don't feel like practicing, and just letting myself not practice when I don't want to practice. That's a big thing. But yeah, nature walks, taking notes on what's growing around me, getting to know the flora and fauna around me, connecting with local spirits, that's a big one because one, it's fucking fun, I love it. Two, it's helping my mental health a lot because whenever I'm outside, I feel much better. That's just the thing. I'm a sun person. Whenever the sun is out and I am out, I am much more happy than whenever I'm inside. So that's amazing. And it also helps my practice a lot because I can forage the things around me and I can form relationships with plant spirits and with local spirits and get their help in my spell work. So I think it just helps in manifold ways. One thing I would love to do, but I can't because I don't have a tub, is bath rituals. If I had a bathtub, I would do so many bath rituals because I love taking baths. They are so good for self-care, and doing a bath ritual for, I don't know, inducing a feeling of calm or even self-confidence, self-love, or like a power bath or something like that. I feel like that would be amazing. Also, of course, meditation is a big thing. Meditation is also something that helps my mental health a lot. It's a big part of self-care for me. I don't do it nearly as often as I should, I know that, but it is something that I do that I personally think is also a part of my witchcraft practice that I do for self-care. Teas, of course. Honestly, incense sounds weird, but incense, like smelling incense, smelling burning herbs really, really calms me down. So that's a nice thing because also I can like use it in a double way, if that makes sense. I can use it, one, as an offering and then also enjoy it myself. So that is great. And then the last Patreon question, how has your spiritual practice changed over time? Okay, so first of all, if you're interested in that, I'm actually making a video at the start of every new year. I think I've done it for the past 3 years now. In the first year, I basically just told you how my practice is looking. And then the 2 years after that, I always basically rewatched the old video and then talked a little bit about how my practice has changed. So in those videos, you can see very well how my practice has changed over the past 3 years. But to make it very short, because it was very accessible, I started out as a Wiccan, as a lot of people do. So it was very Wicca. It was already a little bit Nordic inspired, but like far, far away from anything that was well researched. So it was a little bit Nordic flavored, but very Wicca, very modern eclectic witchcraft. And over time it has changed a lot. Even only like the sources that I work from, like back then I only read modern witchcraft books because of course I was starting out. Nowadays I read very little modern witchcraft books, and whenever I read them they don't necessarily give me a lot of new information. So the sources I use, as I already went into a little bit, have changed a lot. My practice has become much more folk-based. Like even when I started out, I was never really a ceremonialist or anything. I already tended to do more low magic than high magic. And of course that has stayed the same, but I have gotten much more folky with it because I went into folk magic. I'm doing much more spirit work. At the beginning of my practice, I didn't work with any spirits. I didn't work with any deities, nothing. I didn't know ancestor veneration, nothing. I didn't even really believe in deities. So that has changed a lot because right now my practice is very spirit and deity work heavy, more spirit than deity work nowadays. Of course, I'm a full-fledged Norse pagan now who does proper research on topics. I wasn't in the beginning, and in the beginning I was a very big armchair witch. I am not anymore, luckily. I think that's that, but if you want to go deeper into how my practice has changed more in the couple of 3 years, then check out, I guess, the last video, because I always rewatch the previous videos in the new videos, so I will link the how my practice has changed video up there, and also maybe in the video description if I remember. And that was the Patreon questions. So now let us go into the Instagram and YouTube questions. Why do you shave your head? I recently shaved mine and I love it. Just curious. To be fair, I have shaved my head for a long time. I think 6 years or so. I think it was 6 or 7 years ago that I shaved my head for the first time. And first of all, I wanted to get rid of my long hair because I had waist long hair. Extremely thick and a lot of hair, so it was so friggin' annoying, and I thought I would just change it up and get rid of it. And then also I thought, okay, people with a bald head are fucking sexy and maybe it will look good on me, so we will just try. And also I was extremely self-conscious always about my forehead because I have quite the big forehead and I have a little bit of protruding ears, and I always was very self-conscious about that, and I thought, okay, if I have to look at them all the time because I have a shaved head, that's confrontation therapy, and I will probably at some point get rid of the self-consciousness, and I did. So yeah, those were, I think, the 3 main reasons, and it worked like a charm. Like, first of all, I look friggin' fancy with the shaved head. I really love it. Even though my head looks a little bit like a bean, my head kind of looks like this a little bit, but and now I'm not self-conscious about my ears or my forehead anymore, so that's great. Did you ever work or interact with Jormungandr? No, not really, to be honest. Favorite season? Spring. Spring and like early summer when it's not that hot yet. Back when I was a kid, it didn't really get hot ever in northern Germany, where I'm from. Nowadays, we get like 35 degrees Celsius, and that's far too hot for me. Everything above 25 is far too much. So spring and early summer when it's around 20 to 25 degrees Celsius and it's just sunny, that's nice. Basically anything that involves it not raining and the sun being out is amazing. How do I talk to the gods? like you would talk to another human being, maybe a little bit more respectful. I mean, of course, it depends on the deity. I kind of feel like with Loki, you can talk however you like because he doesn't really mind. But yeah, in general, I don't like write poems to them all the time or anything like that. I usually just speak from the heart, like I would speak with, I don't know, a friend. But I will just cut out most of the cuss words, if you know what I mean. But I don't do anything fancy. I think you can just talk to them like you would to another human being that you are respectful to. Oh, no question, just a hug. Oh, that's lovely. Hugs back. How to deal with having promised an offering to Freya and not having delivered other than apologizing. Okay, I mean, it depends on the offering. If it was like a physical offering or something that you can still do, then I would just give it now, once you have realized that you forgot it, and just apologize and give it later. That's something I feel like you could do. If it's something that was time sensitive and you cannot do anymore, I would try to deliver something of equal value or something that has a higher value. So like an extra special offering. Like if I told them that I would do something on a specific day and I didn't do that, then I would either offer that I would do it on another day, or I would do something that is like more of a challenge to me, or I don't know, something that shows my devotion to them even more than the thing that I initially offered. But in the end, like you cannot buy yourself out of the disappointment or something. Like you cannot really like solve the problem, you know? It's like with human beings. If you can apologize to them and you can try to make up for it, but in the end, it's on them to decide if they, like how they react, if they take your apology or if they don't. But usually, like, of course, Freya will show you if she disapproves. But in general, like, I doubt that she will smite you or something. Okay, how do you work with ancestors, especially if you have ancestors or family that are problematic? Okay, how do you work with ancestors? First of all, I think I have a video on ancestor veneration. You can watch that. For me personally, it's a lot of research, like a lot of research on my family, research on the languages that they spoke. So for me, for example, learning Danish, which I should pick up again. I kind of let it slide a little bit the past couple of months. But yeah, learning the language, also diving into, for example, their folk practices was a big thing for me, getting into thralldom, for example. I personally connect at the moment most with my family, like my deceased family members, like my grandparents, or like my great-grandparents, and also only the family members that I know that weren't problematic, because of course I am German, so you know what that means when it comes to ancestors. It is possible that there were potentially Nazis in my family line. I don't know of any, at least, but it's possible, of course. But the thing is, I just don't really address them. I have heard that you can like try to lift them up, and of course try to like dismantle anything that they may have brought down through the family line. So I don't know, if I had a major Nazi in my family line, for example, they could have given their racism and bigotry down to their children, and they to their children, and further down to me. So one thing that I could do in that case would be to try to deal with that and try to get rid of that and kind of heal that, so that, I mean, I will not get any children, but so that I would not give that down to my children if I had any. But yeah, in the end, I think everyone has problematic ancestors because we have so many ancestors. There's just no fucking way that none of them have been problematic or have done anything that's fucked. Especially if you go back to, I don't know, the 1800s, 1700s, people were shit. So, or of course, a lot of people were shit, like racism and colonialism and stuff like that was a thing. So it's very unlikely that you have only nice people in your family line. What first inspired you to begin pole dancing? I already got into it a little bit. Freya was a big part. Also, I just think it's an insanely cool sport. Like it's fun. I watched videos on it and I thought it looked so insanely fun and insanely cool. And also I like feeling sexy, so that was a plus. And it's also an amazing workout, and I had never tried any workout or any sport that has to do with dancing. So I thought, okay, it's a very new thing for me, and I don't exercise at all, and it looks fun, so why not try it? And then also Freya, of course, was a big part, as I already said. So yeah, those were my reasons, and it was a very good decision because it is, one, insanely fun. Dancing is just insanely fun. It's an insane full body workout. Wow. I think I have never been so sore in my entire life. I would advise anyone to try it. It's so fucking fun and it's an amazing workout. What helps you with confidence? I like your confidence. People always tell me that I'm a self-confident person, and I am not. I can assure you, I am not a self-confident person. But the interesting thing is that I am a Leo rising. So people always perceive me as being a self-confident person, probably because I am just a very open and honest person. And I'm not shy or anything, but I'm not self-confident. It may look like it, but I'm not. But what helps me with self-confidence? I think YouTube actually is a big part. By doing these videos and in general posting on the socials, I see how many people align with what I have to say, and people struggle with similar things that I struggle with, so I can see that I'm not alone in it. Also, pole has helped a lot. Also, confrontation therapy and finding out that people actually usually don't react as negatively to you and don't perceive you as negatively as you assume that they do. So that has helped a lot. Is it dangerous to work with Hel? No, definitely not. She's a lovely goddess. I would advise anyone to interact with her because she is so lovely. We're very motherly, interestingly enough. What's your favorite part about being a practitioner? Self-empowerment, definitely, because you kind of feel like you finally have a way to get a little bit of control over the things in your life that you feel like you don't have control over. That's a great thing. For me, a big part is connecting with my surroundings, with the nature around me, forging connections to the other worlds. I think that's amazing. Book recommendations for identifying plants. I cannot really give you any recommendations because I don't know where you're from. Those kinds of books will be always very localized, so you can basically get any guide for your area. I cannot really give you a recommendation again because I don't know where you are from, but honestly, you can just get the first best guide. I don't think that one is necessarily much better than another one. You can just buy one for your local area and then try it and see if it's any good. One thing that I would advise you though is to make sure that the book has a lot of photos of the plants. That helps me a lot personally because sometimes one photo isn't really enough to identify them. What's a plant you have a strong connection to? Can be wild, your tea, or anything. Oh, so many. Okay, first of all, oak trees. That's why, for example, I have oak leaves and acorns tattooed. I love oak. I love mugwort, really want to get a mugwort tattoo too. Blackberry or bramble, definitely love that. Another one, rowan. I have grown to love rowan the past year. Two plants that I have actually gotten quite obsessed with this year are forget-me-nots and lungwort. Lungwort is so fucking cool. You have to look it up. They have like, which way around? I think they start out with pink flowers, and once they have been pollinated, they turn purple. That's so cool. Forget-me-nots do a similar thing with a little yellow ring around the center of the flower. Once they have been pollinated, they turn white. Those things are so cool. So those are two that I have forged a new connection with this year. And I always don't really know why I get obsessed with a specific plant, but it just happens. Honestly, I should make much more videos on plants because I am very much of a green witch, I have come to realize. But I always don't really know how to package any information about plants into an interesting video without me just reciting plant information. I don't know. Tell me in the comments. Are there any spirits of any type that you haven't yet but would like to work with in the future. Okay, Albert, Sussex Peller, has really influenced me to get into Agrippa's books, and I kind of would really like to incorporate him into my ancestor work and kind of invoke him and ask him questions. That would be amazing, especially because he is, or was, of course, in the 16th century, like a major influence on the occultism scene, and he was German, so that's really cool. I would really like to connect deeper with Eir. Oh, there's this one ancestral spirit that recently came in that I definitely want to connect with more. I talked to this spirit once, but I really want to connect with them more because it was such a nice conversation and interaction that I would really like to connect with them more. Oh, yes, water spirits. Just recently had the chance to connect with the spirit of the Baltic Sea, which was really cool, but I want to definitely connect more to water spirits, like spirits of local lakes and streams and things like that, and wind spirits. Wind is something that we have in excess here in northern Germany, so I kind of feel like it's very stupid that I haven't thought about working with wind spirits yet. I really, really want to do that. Alright, I'm sorry, I'm back. I was at a house viewing very quickly, so 4 hours have gone by, I think. 4, 5, I think about 4 hours have gone by. So let us continue with the YouTube questions. What are your big 3 in astrology? Do you have any interesting placements, aspects, or stelliums? So I'm not very deeply into astrology. I only know like surface level stuff. My big 3 are Sun, Leo, also Leo rising, and Pisces moon. So a very interesting combination, let's just say it like that. I actually only have 1 air placement and like 3 fire placements, and everything else is water and earth. I kind of feel like that is very obvious if you watch my videos or if you know me as a person. I think it's pretty obvious that I'm very water and earth heavy. I don't think I have any stelliums, at least not that I know of. I have like some signs that I have planets in twice or something, but nothing that comes up a lot. I have Scorpio 3 times now that I look at it, but I don't know if that's enough for a stellium. My Jupiter and Pluto are in Scorpio, and my North Node is also in Scorpio. I don't know if that's interesting, but apart from that, I don't think there's anything that's very interesting about my chart, but just very, very water and earth heavy. I'm still pretty new to paganism and witchcraft, more so to paganism, and I was wondering how someone would know what to put on an altar and when to take stuff off the altar. Like food, for example. Do you leave it there for a day or 2 or leave it there until it expires? Same with other items such as money bowls, crystals, special personal items, etc. Alright, so first of all, I would assume from the question that you are like a free-flying pagan or a witch, not necessarily in a specific tradition yet, because yeah, there are probably some traditions where you have very specific things on an altar. I know that if you are, for example, a traditional kind of Wiccan, then you have specific items that you have on your altar. But if you don't necessarily have a specific tradition that you're part of, then you can basically do whatever you want. Especially if it's just your personal working altar, you can really put on there whatever you feel like fits, whatever you really use and need. I would definitely advise you not to put stuff on your altar that you don't actually work with, because then it just gets cluttered and it will just collect dirt, and that's about it. When it comes to altars for ancestors, deities, spirits, etc., maybe like a candle or something. A lot of people really like having a dedicated candle for the spirit or the deity in question, so that whenever they want to initiate communication with them, they can light the candle. That can be basically a torch that guides them in. And apart from that, I mean, you could, for example, get a statue of that deity, for example, if there is one for them, and you can put items on there that you feel like have a connection to the deity. So, for example, Freya is often associated with amber, and of course with cats, for example. So I have a little cat made of amber on the altar for her. Or if you know about any specific symbols that are associated with the spirit or the deity, then you can of course place those on the altar. And of course, if it's about your ancestors, then of course something that belonged to them would be perfect, or something that has a connection to the culture that they grew up in and lived in. And when it comes to food, for example, oh, by the way, I have a video on altars, and I also have a video on offerings, where I also talk about when to take items off the altar, like food and stuff. I don't know of any specific rules. Maybe some traditions do have some specific rules, but I don't know of any. So you can, again, do whatever you like or whatever makes sense. So for example, if I personally put food out or something, I will try to put it out, then leave it there overnight, and then take it off the altar the next day, because I personally don't want it to get bad and moldy on the altar. I don't really think that's nice, and it's also not very hygienic to do that. And I just don't want molding food around, so I will just take it off the next day, and that's usually fine. If it's just water, I sometimes leave it 2 or 3 days and then take it off. But in general, I mean, would you personally, as a person, eat food that has been sitting there for a week? Probably not. So spirits probably also don't want food that has been laying there for 7 days and has been molding and rotting. So that's why I personally remove food pretty quickly. Do you also work with plants medicinally or solely magically? And if you also work with them medicinally, what herbs would you recommend for everyone to have or work with? I am not an herbalist, like a medical herbalist. I would love to do some kind of course at some point, but I have not yet. So the only things I really do are, like, for example, if I have a sore throat or something, I will maybe drink some chamomile tea to soothe it or something like that. But really nothing exciting that I could share with you. Also, I am legally not allowed as a German citizen to share anything like that, because I am not a trained professional. So even if I did use any herbs on myself, I wouldn't even legally be allowed to share it, because that would be false medical advice, so nothing I can share. I have a comment right here from one of my YouTube members, which of course I will also definitely answer. How did you discover your path to being a Norse witch? For me, I think what sparked the interest initially were runes, because that's usually if you start out, because I started out as a witch and not as a pagan. So runes were simply the first thing that I was exposed to, and that just sparked my interest, and I started doing some more research. Where did the runes come from? How were they used? Which then sparked an interest in the Viking Age in general and into Germanic paganism in general, so I did some research there. At some point I got interested in the deities and started working with those, and at that point I was already a Norse pagan. But yeah, runes were the initial spark of interest for me, and I kind of feel like that's the case for a lot of people. And another one from a YouTube member: how do you feel about the Eddas? I feel the gods are not restricted by the Eddas. I work with Loki a lot, and he's very different to the Eddas. Okay, first of all, the Eddas and the sagas are like a starting point for things, but they were written, or at least most of them were written, by Christians hundreds of years after the Christianization of the Scandinavian countries. So you have to keep in mind that there is a lot of Christian bias in these. A lot of things have probably been changed. So they will never be 100% accurate. They are still as close as we can really get to primary sources, but they will never be 100% accurate, and you always have to keep that in mind. So I personally like to use them as like a guide a little bit, but I don't see them as like steadfast facts. Especially when it comes to deities like Freya, for example, who of course, as a very sexual deity and a very like independent woman, of course that is a deity that was probably changed in some ways by the Christian writers. So you just have to keep those things in mind. There are just some things that are very obviously a Christian influence in these texts. So you always have to read those texts very, very carefully and always discern if this makes sense like this, or if this could have been changed, if you see any like Christian bias in there. I also think the gods are not restricted to how they are described in the Eddas. I think with Loki especially, a lot of people have very different experiences with Loki than the way Loki is described in the Eddas. I also have the same experience with Hel, for example. Hel is always described as kind of awful in the Eddas. And that, in my experience, is definitely a Christian bias. Like, I kind of feel like they definitely put a lot of Christian hell influence in there to make it sound very horrible. But the goddess Hel is very, very great. Like, she's an awesome goddess. So same experience there. Hell to me is very different than she is described and than her world is described in the Eddas. So yeah, I would personally agree. Okay, I think this will be the last question because I've been filming for quite some time now. Do you tell people about your beliefs? How do you react to people being rude about it? I'm from Germany and witchcraft is quite common but stigmatized as heck. You can confirm, I guess, and I always struggle to tell people because I'm scared they won't take me seriously. I agree 100%. I don't know how it is where you live, but where I live, witchcraft is not common at all. I don't know a lot of German witches around me, and I think that is probably also due to the fact that we do not talk about it, because Germany is very, very atheistic, agnostic, and people have this weird atheist supremacy vibe around them where as soon as someone says that they are religious, and it doesn't matter which religion it is, as soon as someone mentions that they are religious or that they are spiritual or are interested in anything like that, they will start talking down to you a lot. They will make fun of you and they will not take you seriously anymore. And as someone who works in the IT sphere, which is even worse because everyone is like hyper rationalistic in that sphere, I just don't tell people. I also don't tell people that I have a channel, that I have a shop or anything. I might mention that I do social media, but I won't tell them what I do or I won't tell them about my channel, nothing like that. I kind of sometimes feel like I live a double life because witchcraft and paganism and my channel and my shop and stuff is such a huge part of my life that I cannot tell people about, which is kind of sad. If one would become a friend of mine or I would start meeting them in private, because why the hell not if you like someone, and I kind of feel like they are more open to other types of religions and spiritualities, then I would tell them, but only if they have gained my trust, basically. If I get the feeling that they won't judge me for it. If I meet someone and I get the feeling that they would be open to it, that they maybe are interested in similar things, or that they're just very tolerant and just in general nice people, then I will tell them maybe. But if not, then I will just not tell them. Which means I will usually not really have anything to talk to people about. Witchcraft and paganism is a huge part of my life and my channel and stuff, and since everything is kind of lumped together in the spirituality sphere, if I can't talk about it to someone, then there's not really a lot I can talk about left. I wish I was a person that is so self-confident that they would be like, well, I don't care if you think that's ridiculous. This is what I believe in and I stand up for it, and if you make fun of me for it, then go fuck you. Sadly, I'm a people pleaser and I'm socially anxious, so I'm sadly not that kind of person who will still tell everyone. I wish I was. I really, really wish I was. I really envy people like that. If you can do that, kudos to you. I wish. But yeah, that's just not how things are going here in Germany, at least where I live. All right, and with that being said, those are the questions that I'm getting to this time around. If I didn't answer your question, I'm sorry, I can't possibly reply to all. That's just too many. Patron and YouTube member shout out. Let's do that. Thank you so much to Saber, Pam, Mia, Victoria, Autumn, Shay, Lindsay, Linda, The Other Saffron, Silent Selena, Richard, Jennifer, Ryan, Alex, Jazz, Shaw, Christiana, T. Demon, Elizabeth, Sylvia, Katrina, V, Bella, Derek, Smiley, Kirsten, Shannon, Andrew, Tisha, Sarah, Roan, Caesar, Shelby, Helena, SJ, Anne, Kate, Cade, Z, Kent, Brittany, Small Kata, Josh, Elinura, Knarr, Rixie Business, Annalena, Ashley, Tim, John, Phoenix, Jenny, Maggie, Amy, Bethany, Timothy, Coffee, or the Honorary Gossip Squirrel, and last but not least, Bjorn. And my lovely YouTube members, thank you so much to Pat, Lindsay, Betsy, Miller, and KT. As always, I hope you liked this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe and give a thumbs up and ring the bell down below so you're notified whenever I upload a new video. Feel free to check out my other socials and my shop for ethically and sustainably sourced witchy wares. And if you want to support me in another way, then feel free to check out my Patreon or my YouTube membership. And I will see you in another video. Bye!